Chicago, February, the kind of cold that doesn't ask. 47 stores, 11,000 people, a name on the door of every building. And tonight, one man is walking into his own company like a stranger. He's not wearing a suit, no corner office, no executive car waiting at the curb. Just a gray work shirt, a pair of borrowed boots, and a plastic name badge that says someone he isn't. The fluorescent lights don't flatter anyone down here. He already knew that. What he didn't know, what no quarterly report had told him, what no board meeting had prepared him for, was the sound he was about to hear from behind a closed door at the end of a hallway. Crying, the not soft kind, the kind that has been waiting a long time for a moment alone. He slows, he almost keeps walking. Almost. He built this company with $8,000 in his father's name. 52 years, 47 stores, 11,000 people whose rent and groceries and children's school supplies ran through the payroll system James Caldwell had built from a single ledger book and a prayer. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, he stopped seeing them. This is the story of what it cost him to look again. James Caldwell stood in front of the mirror behind his desk on a Tuesday morning in late February, 63 years old. Silver at the temples, lines around his eyes that had arrived gradually enough that he'd never quite noticed them coming. The kind of face that had learned, over decades, to show exactly as much as it needed to show and nothing more. On his desk sat one piece of paper, the retirement form, unsigned. His assistant had placed it there 3 weeks ago with a fresh cup of coffee and a smile, and he'd thanked her and set it aside and told himself he'd sign it after the quarterly review. Then after the board meeting. Then after the holidays. Then after he figured out why a perfectly healthy store was sending in numbers that didn't belong in the real world. He looked away from the mirror. Looked at the photograph on the wall instead, his father, Earl Caldwell, standing in front of a grocery store on the south side of Chicago. Wearing a green security uniform 2 sizes too large. Shoulders straight, chin up. The way a man holds himself when he's decided dignities doesn't wait for permission from anyone. Earl Caldwell worked that job for 31 years. Never calls in sick, never complained. Never once came home and put his trouble on the table for his family to share. Never got promoted, not once. James had asked him about it when he was 14. Standing in the kitchen while his father ate supper late, still in the uniform, shoes still on. "Why do you keep going back, Dad? They're never going to move you up." His father had looked at him a long time before answering. "Because my family eats," he said. That's why. James had built Caldwell's department stores so that no one else's father would ever have to give that answer. He turned back to the desk, picked up the report that had been sitting under 3 other folders since last Tuesday. Branch number 7, northwest side of Chicago, mid-sized store. The kind of location that kept the lights on but never made anyone's highlight reel. 0 complaints filed. Employee satisfaction score of 98. Turnover rate of 0 for 8 consecutive months. Labor cost down to 27% from the same period the previous year. He read it once, then again, then set it down and stared at the wall. Because he knew stores, he'd stocked shelves and swept floors and worked a register at a place not much different from Branch 7 when he was 19. And the one thing he knew, the thing no spreadsheet could manufacture, was that no store with real human beings in it ever looked like that. 0 complaints didn't mean happy employees. It meant scared ones. He called a contact that afternoon, an independent analyst he'd used twice before. Someone outside the company, outside the board, outside the entire ecosystem of people whose mortgages depended on telling James Caldwell what he wanted to hear. He sent the raw data, asked for a clean look, no pressure, no timeline. Just tell me if something doesn't fit. The call came back in 48 hours. "It's been altered," the analyst said. "No greeting, no softening, just that." James asked him to be specific. Multiple fields, complaint logs, hours worked, turnover records. Someone went into the back end and smoothed it. They knew the system. They were careful. A pause. "Not careful enough. Up address 18th floor, your building." James thanked him. Hung up. He sat in his office for a long time after that, not thinking, just sitting. The way you sit when your mind already understands something your chest is not ready to accept. 18th floor, his CFO's floor. Frank Tellis, 15 years. James had brought Frank in when Caldwell's was 12 stores and a vision and not much else. He'd hired him away from a consulting firm at a salary the company could barely support at the time, because James had learned to recognize the difference between people who were smart and people who were both smart and right, and Frank had seemed like the second kind. 15 years of board meetings and handshakes and late dinners and conversations about integrity, about what it meant to build something that lasted, about the responsibility of size. James didn't call Frank. He didn't call anyone. He sat with it. The way his mother used to say, you had to sit with hard things before you let them move you anywhere. Don't let the first feeling make your first decision. He sat with it until the feeling settled from shock into something colder and more useful. Then he opened his desk drawer, took out the retirement form, read it once, folded it, put it back, and picked up his phone to make a different kind of call entirely. He drove to a Goodwill store on a Wednesday morning, bought dark work pants, a gray collar shirt, and a pair of boots that had belonged to someone else and showed it honestly. He paid cash, drove to a motel he had booked under a different name, and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the clothes laid out in front of him. He called Shirley Owens, his HR director, and told her only that he needed a clean employee profile with no flags attached for a quiet internal check. Shirley had given him the kind of silence that meant she was filing information away very carefully without asking questions she hadn't been invited to ask. The badge arrived by courier the next morning. Jimmy Cole, tool staff. He pinned it to the gray shirt, looked in the mirror. Jimmy Cole looked back at him, older than expected. Tyrador, the kind of man who has carried weight long enough that it had become indistinguishable from posture. He drove to Branch 7, parked in the employee lot, walked in through the side entrance, the one that smelled of cardboard and floor cleaner, and the particular cold of spaces that never quite warm up in February. Nobody looked twice at him, which told him something immediately, not about the employees, about the culture. In a healthy workplace, new faces get noticed, get greeted. A place where people walk past new arrivals without eye contact is a place where people have learned not to engage unnecessarily. He noted it, kept walking. The first thing that stopped him was the schedule board. It hung on the wall near the break room. A whiteboard covered in handwritten shifts, crossed out names, arrows pointing at changes that didn't follow any logic he could trace. He stood in front of it for a full minute. A name repeated in different colors of marker, different columns, different weeks. D. Haynes, 38 hours one week, 11 the next, 32 the week after, then back to 14. No pattern except the absence of one. He photographed it with his phone, quietly, the way you check us. Then he heard it. From behind the door marked employees only. Restrooms. Crying, not the soft kind. The kind that has been waiting for a moment alone, a door closed, 5 minutes where no one needs anything. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and exhausted and has given up on being quiet about it. James stood in the hallway. He almost kept walking. That was the truth of it, when he thought about how close everything had come to not happening at all. He almost kept walking. He had a store to observe, a cover to maintain, an investigation to run. He knocked instead. 2 soft knocks. Then nothing.
The crying stopped abruptly.
Minute came a voice from inside, steadying itself if in real time. He waited. The door opened. Dora Haynes was 42 years old, though she looked older in that hallway under the fluorescent light with her eyes red and her custodial uniform worn soft at the elbows. Not older in a harsh way. In the way of someone who has been asked to carry more than her portion and has done it without complaint for long enough that the weight has become part of how she stands. She glanced at him once, a quick, assessing look, the kind that people develop when they have learned that strangers' holidays come with cost, then bent to pick something up from the floor. Her name badge had fallen. Her hands were shaking enough that she couldn't quite grip it. James bent down first, picked it up, held it out. She took it, pinned it back on without looking at him, squared her shoulders. The practiced gesture of someone deciding to be fine. "I'm sorry," she said. "I need to get back." "You don't have to apologize," James said. He kept his voice easy. "I'm Jimmy." She glanced up again. "Longer this time. You're not from here," she said. Not a question, not suspicious, just honest, the way people are when they've stopped spending energy on softening everything. "Not originally," he said. She almost said something and then didn't, then said it anyway. "It's just been a hard week." she said. James didn't fill the space after that. He'd learned a long time ago that silence, offered without pressure, was often the most useful thing. Dora looked at the schedule board on the wall across from them. My daughter, she said. Then stopped. Started again, slower. She's 8. She has a heart condition. They moved the surgery up. It's next month now. I should be relieved. The insurance. They say I don't qualify. My hours have been inconsistent. That's the word they use. James kept his face steady, because what he was feeling was not steady. You've been here a while, he said. 3 years and 4 months, she said. Not one sick day. She stopped herself, looked at him sideways, slightly embarrassed. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Sometimes it's easier with someone who just got here, he said. She thought about that. The hours change every week, she said, quietly now. 32 one week, 11 the next. I can't budget. I can't plan. And the way they count it, I'm never consistently full-time, which means I never technically qualify for the health plan. She said it with the flatness of someone who has explained a thing so many times that the emotion has worn smooth off the words. But the floor always gets cleaned. The work always gets done. Have you talked to HR? James asked. Filed anything? Dora's expression changed. Not anger. Something older and more careful. The look of a person who has gone through a door that was supposed to lead somewhere and found a wall on the other side. I filed a complaint, she said. 9 months ago, official form. Through the portal, I documented everything. And the week after I filed, my hours dropped to 10. A pause. 2 weeks after that, someone from the HR office called me, said that the complaint had been reviewed, that there was no record of any scheduling irregularities. She paused again, precise about it. My complaint was gone. Like it had never been submitted. The hallway felt quiet. James looked at her badge. D. Haynes, custodial staff. 3 years and 4 months. A daughter with a heart condition. A complaint that vanished. And hours that moved just enough, just carefully enough, to keep her permanently just below the threshold for benefits she had earned. That wasn't carelessness. That was a system. I'm sorry that happened, he said. She looked at him. He held her gaze. Something in her face settled. Slightly. Not all the way, but enough. I should go, she said. Boyd checks the east wing at 7. She walked back toward the floor. James stood in the hallway a moment longer. Then he followed. He spent the first day learning the actual job. Not performing it. Learning it. There was a difference, and it showed up in the body quickly. Supply closet was critically understocked. One diluted bottle of floor cleaner stretched across stations it was never designed to cover. The anti-fatigue mats that company policy required for hard floor stations were stacked in a storage room still in their packaging. 3 cleaning requests for the same grout issue in the north restroom sat handwritten on a notepad near Dora's cart, dated a month apart, going nowhere. Small things, each one explainable on its own, each one isolated, something a manager could wave away in 30 seconds. Together, they told a story about a place where the people who did the work had stopped expecting their requests to matter. Boyd Garrett showed up at 10:45. James had him placed immediately. Mid-30s, hair neat, shirt pressed. He moved through the store like someone sent checking on work, but like someone reminding everyone that they could be seen. The specific walk of a man who has confused small authority for large authority and built his whole manner around the confusion. He found Dora near the restroom corridor. James kept pushing his cart, slowly, steadily, near enough to Haynes. Boyd's voice carried without effort. Clipped. Professional enough to avoid accusation, but hard enough to land. This hallway. Dora stopped. Yes? Scuff marks. Right there. I've been on the south wing since 7. I rotated to this section 40 minutes ago. I don't track your rotation. I track results. A beat, I'm noting it. My office at noon. He walked away before he could respond. James kept his head down. He mopped the same section of floor 3 times. Not because it needed it, because his hands needed somewhere to go. Devin Price found him on the first break. Younger, maybe 30, an easy manner, relaxed enough that it read as confidence before you'd decided whether to trust it. He worked in the stockroom and apparently made a point of finding new employees during breaks. You're Jimmy, right? He dropped into the chair across from James. Devin, 2 years here, which means I know where everything is and why nothing works. James almost smiled. Good to know. First thing, don't talk back to Boyd. Not even politely. He keeps track differently than you'd expect. Devon unwrapped something from a paper bag. Second thing, the schedule board is not random. Nothing on it is random. What do you mean? Devon looked at him steadily. Hours go down when someone asks a question Boyd doesn't like. Hours go up when he needs something done and doesn't want to call in overtime officially. He paused. He's very consistent about it, just not in the way the handbook describes. Has anyone gone over his head? Devon looked at him a beat too long. Dora did, he said, 9 months ago. He said it simply. Just information. And, James asked. And now Dora works whatever hours she's given and doesn't say much about it. Devon took a drink from his water bottle. Word is the complaint didn't make it past someone's desk. James nodded like a man who was just listening. Inside, he was cataloging everything. Noon, Boyd's office, glass partition facing the break room. James sat with a coffee he wasn't drinking and watched Dora stand across from Boyd's seated posture. A deliberate arrangement. The kind that announces itself without needing to say anything. He couldn't hear the words, but he could read the room. Dora's hands clasped behind her back, Boyd leaning back in his chair with the relaxed certainty of a man who had never once worried about his own position. Then Boyd pulled a timesheet from a drawer and marked it with a red pen, unhurried, right in front of her. 15 minutes docked. James watched it happen. He did not move, because moving now would end everything before it started. So he sat with his cold coffee, and he counted the cost of every minute he stayed in this chair, and he decided that the cost was worth paying if it meant he understood the full picture before he acted. When Dora came out, she walked past the break room without looking in. Head up, spine straight. Whatever had happened in that office, she had decided not to carry on her face. He thought, there is more integrity in how this woman walks out of a bad room than in anything I have seen in a boardroom in years. He went back to work. James drove to the motel at 6. He had a desk, a lamp with a slightly bent shade, and a window that showed a parking lot and a chain-link fence, and beyond that, a gas station. He sat at the desk with his laptop and his phone and the notes from the day, and he began. He pulled the employment records he had legitimate access to through his own executive credentials, through back channels that wouldn't raise flags, accessed from a device that wasn't registered to Caldwell's systems. What he affirmed what the schedule board had shown him. The official turnover rate at Branch had not been 0 for 8 months. That was a manufactured figure. The real number, cross-referenced against actual payroll exits, was 11 departures in the same period, all recorded as voluntary resignation. 7 of them had left within 2 weeks of submitting a request for schedule review. 3 had departed the same week someone had asked for information about health insurance eligibility thresholds. He moved to the complaint logs. 32 complaints submitted through the internal HR portal in the past 14 months. 32 people who had done exactly what they were told to do. Filed the form, trusted the system. 2 had generated any response at all. The other 30 were closed, marked reviewed, no action required. Every single one of them closed by the same account. Hail Marsha Processing. James looked up Linda Marsh, direct administrative assistant to Frank Tellis, CFO. Had been for 6 years. He sat back in the chair. Outside, a truck moved past on the street. The gas station sign flickered once and held. He thought about Frank, about what it meant to have trusted someone for 15 years and been trusted back. Or to have thought you were being trusted back. To have built a working relationship on shared values and discovered in a 48-hour period that the values had only ever been on one side. He thought about Dora in the hallway. 3 years and 4 months, not one sick day. He thought about her daughter, whose name he didn't know yet. He opened his laptop and started a new document, not a memo, not a corporate file, just a record, dated, time-stamped, specific. Everything he'd seen, everything he'd confirmed, everything that had been said. Then he opened a second browser window and composed an email to Shirley Owens. Personal account to personal account, encrypted. He asked for the original HR complaint submissions from Branch 7, the pre-edit versions, from backup servers only. He asked who had authorized Linda Marsh's access to the complaint closure function. He asked for the full employment record of every Caldwell's employee at this location, pulled from the mirror server rather than the primary system. He hit send, closed the laptop, looked at the bent shade lamp. He had not eaten since breakfast. He didn't feel hungry. He felt the particular alertness of a man who has understood something that cannot be ununderstood, and who knows that from this point forward, every decision he makes will have a weight that the decisions before it didn't carry. He picked up his phone and called his daughter. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, it's almost 9. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he said. "Just wanted to hear your voice." A pause. "You never called just to hear my voice." "Maybe I should do it more." Another pause. He could hear her recalibrating. "What happened?" "Nothing yet," he said. "I'll explain when I have the whole picture." "Are you in trouble?" "No," he said. "I'm just finding out some things I should have found out sooner." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad, yeah, come for dinner on Sunday when this is done. Whatever it is." "I'll be there," he said. He hung up, sat in the quiet. Then he reached into his jacket and took out the retirement form, which he'd been carrying folded inside pocket since the day his assistant had placed it on his desk. He unfolded it, read it once, read it again. The language was standard. The date was April. The line for his signature waited at the bottom like something patient. He folded it back along its original creases, put it in the desk drawer, closed the drawer, and went to bed without signing it. He was back at 5:45 the next morning, not because the shift started then, because he wanted to be there when the building opened and see who arrived first and what the first hour looked like before any management was present. The Chicago cold had a different quality at dawn, not sharper, just more honest, the kind that doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. He sat in the car for a few minutes. He thought about what he was doing, not the strategy of it. The simple human reality of it. A 63-year-old man in borrowed work boots, sitting in a parking lot, about to clock in for $12 an hour in a company his name was on. People who knew him would call it reckless. His board would call it liability. His lawyers would have a number of things to say that he wasn't ready to hear. But he also knew what investigations looked like when the person running the investigation controlled where it was allowed to look. He'd seen it in other companies. He'd read the case studies, clean audits, managed reviews, official inquiries that arrived at conclusions predetermined 2 floors above where the actual problem lived. He needed to see this himself, not through a report. Through his own eyes at floor level, the way his father had seen things every day for 31 years. He got out of the car. Dora was already inside. Of course she was. She had the supply cart positioned near the main entrance and was working through an inventory checklist with the focused quiet of someone who has stopped needing acknowledgement to do their job well. She looked up when he came through the side door. For a second, she seemed surprised. "You came back," she said. "Told you I needed the work," James said. She studied him the way she had in the hallway, assessing, considering whether the assessment she'd made yesterday still held. "You don't look like you need the work," she said. "Everybody looks that way until they do," James said. She considered that, then handed him a mop. "East Wing first," she said. "Boyd checks it at 7. They worked in near silence through the first hour. Not uncomfortable silence, the functional kind. The kind that builds people who are working toward the same thing, even if one of them doesn't yet know the other's full purpose." At 7:15, she appeared beside him at the far end of the electronics aisle. "My daughter's name is Becca," she said. Unprompted. "In case I didn't say." "You didn't," he said, "but I remember everything else. She drew a picture last night of the hospital." Dora smoothed the front of her uniform. A small unconscious motion. She drew it happy, lots of colors. "She's not scared." She paused. "I don't know if that's because she doesn't understand or because she's braver than me." James kept mopping. "Probably both," he said. Dora looked at him sideways. Something shifted in her expression, not all the way to a smile, but the shape of one. "Probably both," she agreed. Shirley's response came in at 9:18. James stepped into the far stockroom corner to read it on his phone. The pre-edit complaint logs contained 32 entries. The edited versions in the primary system showed only 2. The ones that had allowed without to proceed because they were low stakes enough to close without consequence. The other 30 had been accessed and closed within 24 hours of submission, all by El Marsh's account, all before any supervisor at the store level had been notified. Since the complaints had never reached Boyd Garrett, they had been caught one level above him. Frank Tellis's floor. James stood in the stockroom for a moment with that information. It changed the shape of things. Boyd was not the architect. Boyd was the instrument. Someone else had built the machine. He put his phone away, went back to the East Wing. At 9:45, Dora found him near the supply room. She stopped, looked at him the way she'd looked at him in the hallway the day before, this assessment, the weighing of something. Then she reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a small notebook, black cover, pages swollen from use. She held it for a moment, as if deciding something, and then held it out. He took it. The handwriting was small, exact, each entry dated. The day, the hour scheduled, the hours actually clocked, any schedule changes, who authorized them. He turned a page. Another, 40 weeks of entries. Every modification, every reduction, every time her hours had been moved just enough to reset the eligibility clock before it could reach 90 days of consistent full-time. She had been documenting this since the week after her complaint disappeared. "I didn't know what I'd do with it," she said. "I just needed something that couldn't be deleted." James held the notebook. He thought about federal labor statutes, about HR investigations and legal proceedings and the weight of documentation. He thought about what this notebook represented, not just as evidence, but as an act. A woman with no institutional power and no guarantee that anyone would ever look at what she was recording, sitting down every single day for 9 months and writing it down anyway. Because it was true, because it deserved to exist somewhere, he handed it back carefully. "Keep it somewhere safe," he said. "Not here." She took it back, held it for a moment against her chest, then, "Who are you?" Not a question with a rising inflection. A statement with a door left open in it. James looked at her. "Right now," he said, "I'm Jimmy Cole. Mop floors." She waited. "But give it a few days," he said. She held his gaze a moment longer. Then she put the notebook back in her pocket and went back to work. That evening, James drove to the Caldwell's headquarters building. He did not go in. He parked across the street, in the shadow of a parking structure, and looked up at the 18th floor. Frank Tellis' office light was on. It was 11:40 at night. James sat in the car and looked at that light. 15 years. He tried to locate, somewhere in the catalog of those 15 years, a moment when something should have told him. A hesitation. A decision that didn't quite fit. A gap between what Frank said and what Frank did, that he had smoothed over because it was easier to trust a person you'd already invested trust in than to start the accounting over from zero. He couldn't find it, which might mean it wasn't there, or might mean he hadn't been looking. He thought about his mother, about sitting with hard things. He thought about Dora's notebook, 9 months of sitting with a hard thing and writing it down anyway. He started the car, drove back to the motel. The retirement form was in the desk drawer where he'd left it. He left it there. The night shift started at 10. James knew that from the schedule. But knowing a thing and living inside it were two entirely different experiences, separated by the distance between reading about cold water and stepping into it. He stood in the employee lot at 9:45. The Chicago February had sharpened overnight into something with edges, the kind of cold that doesn't negotiate. It moves through whatever you're wearing, and resigns you. The city sets the terms, not you. He zipped his jacket, checked his badge, Jimmy Cole, custodial staff, walked through the side door. The store was different at night, not smaller, just stripped of its pretense. The customer lighting had dropped to maintenance level, and the bright retail warmth of the daytime floor was gone, replaced by the actual place underneath. Concrete and metal shelving and long flat aisles under fluorescent light that produced illumination without producing comfort. The kind of light that shows you everything and flatters nothing. These were the hours when the building revealed what it actually was. And these were the people who knew it best. Dora was already there when he came in. He had not expected that. She had worked the full day shift, 6 in the morning through the afternoon. But her name was on the night roster too, handwritten in Boyd's marker on the section of the schedule board James had photographed on his first day. Boyd had added a night rotation to Dora's schedule 3 weeks ago. No explanation given, no adjustment to her weekly pay classification. Just more hours added to the same flat rate because she needed this job, and Boyd knew she needed this job, and that knowledge had become, in his hands, a tool. She had the supply cart positioned near the entrance, a clipboard in one hand, and she was moving through the opening inventory with the efficient quiet of someone who had long since stopped requiring an audience to do good work. She looked up when he came through the door, nodded once. That was enough between them now. Devon Price arrived 8 minutes later, signed in at the time clock in one smooth motion, and found them near the cart without appearing to look for them. Easy in his body, unhurried, the particular manner of someone who has decided exactly how much energy a situation deserves and allocates accordingly. Night shift, Devon said, not to anyone specific. Every night, Dora said, and yet here we are. He picked up a clipboard from the cart and fell into the routine without further ceremony. James watched both of them briefly, said nothing. The first 2 hours were work, just work, unmediated by observation or strategy. And James discovered quickly that the night shift was not the day shift with the lights turned down. It was a different category of labor entirely. At night, you cleaned everything. The public restrooms, top to bottom, the employee restrooms, the stockroom floor, which accumulated a full day's worth of pallet green boot prints, and the residue of boxes torn open in haste. The loading area in the back, where the delivery drivers left, marks that the daytime crew never reached. The break room, which smelled of reheated food and the specific exhaustion of people who had been on their feet since morning and were now back for more. James did all of it. He did not slow down, did not ask to, because Dora didn't slow down. And this woman had been here since 6 in the morning, had gone home for 3 hours and come back. Not because she wanted to, because the schedule said so. Because Boyd had made the schedule, and the schedule was not a document about fairness. It was a document about what happened when someone with the power to assign hours also had the motive to use those hours as leverage. He mopped, he hauled trash, he broke down the cardboard boxes in the compactor room until his forearms ached with the repetition. He learned the geography of a store at night, which aisles carried sound further than they should, which stockroom doors had to be lifted slightly on the handle to close properly, which corners Boyd Garrett favored when he wanted to materialize without warning. Because Boyd was there. He arrived at midnight, no announcement, just footsteps in the corridor, a measured rhythm, deliberate, the walk of a man who wants you to hear him coming and has made peace with what that says about him. He found Dora near the north restrooms. He usually found Dora first, Haynes. His voice bounced off the tile with the ease of a man in his natural habitat. The grout in here. Dora stood in the doorway with her mop. I'm halfway through. I can see you're halfway through. I'm asking about the grout on the finished side. The cleaning solution we have doesn't penetrate that tile. I've put in 3 written requests for the appropriate product. What you request is not the subject. What this floor looks like is the subject. He made a notation on his clipboard. I'm noting it. He moved on. Dora did not react visibly. She turned back to the second she'd been working and continued. The mop moved in the same steady rhythm it had been moving in before Boyd arrived. James, at the far end of the corridor, had heard everything. He kept his head down. He pushed the mop across a section of floor that had already been clean for 20 minutes. His hands needed the motion. Without it, they would have done something else, and that something else would have ended the night poorly. Later, closer to 1 in the morning, when Boyd had moved to the floor and Devon was working the stock room. Sesim found himself beside Dora near the cleaning supply station. She was refilling a spray bottle from a larger container that was 3/4 empty and labeled with a handwritten note. Last one. Request submitted 10 days ago. He docked you time, James said, not a question. 15 minutes, she said. Bad grout in a restroom I'd been on for 40 minutes. James looked at the nearly empty supply container. How many times have you put in that request? 4. She capped the spray bottle. Different forms, different dates. He did the arithmetic. 4 requests over what looked like 6 weeks, given the dates visible on the notepad nearby. All ignored. Does Boyd approve the supply orders? She looked at him. Boyd approves everything, she said. That's the point. At 1:15, Boyd reappeared on the floor with his clipboard and a particular expression James had come to recognize, the look of a man who has found the setup he needed. Henderson. He used the wrong name. James let it go. I need those pallets in the east receiving area moved to the floor staging zones. All of them. Before 5, James looked toward the back. He'd seen the pallets earlier, 40 of them, seasonal merchandise. Heavy. All 40? He said. Problem with that? The correct answer, the one Jimmy Cole would give, was no. No problem, James said. Boyd moved on. Devon appeared beside James a moment later. That's a 4-person job, he said quietly. I know. He knows that too. I know that also. Devon looked at him with the expression of someone recalibrating. You're not going to argue. Not tonight, James said. He went to move the pallets. It took 2 hours. Box by box on the hand truck when the full pallets were too heavy to move intact. Pallet by pallet when the hand truck could manage. His lower back registered its objection, formally around 2:30, and he noted it and kept moving. His hands, by 3, had moved past soreness into a numb compliance that his body had apparently decided was more efficient than continued complaint. He was 63 years old. He moved 40 pallets. And somewhere in the third trip through the back corridor, wheels of the hand truck catching on the floor seam the way they always did, he passed Boyd's office. The door was not fully closed. A gap, maybe 5 inches. The computer screen inside cast blue light through it. James slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. Controlled. The way you move when something is caught at the edge of attention and you haven't made the decision yet, but your feet are already making it for you. Through the gap, a spreadsheet, open, a tab visible in the upper right corner of the screen, B. Garrett, Jr. James kept moving, all the way down the corridor, out to the staging area, set the pallet down with the others in the position Boyd had specified, stood in the cold of the receiving area, breathed, then he turned around. He was not proud of what he did next. He had never claimed to be someone who stayed on the comfortable side of lines when something important was at stake. He'd inherited that from his father, who had never said it aloud but had simply lived it every day for 31 years. Do what the moment requires. Account for it later. He pushed Boyd's office door open, slowly, the way you move when silence matters more than speed. Boyd was somewhere on the floor. James had heard his footsteps heading toward the grocery section 10 minutes ago. The office was empty. The screen was still on. James sat at the desk. He did not hesitate. He knew this scheduling system. He had approved its implementation 4 years ago. He knew every menu, every data field, every function it was capable of performing. He found the account, B. Garrett, Jr. Employee ID for whom? States, shifts, night. He clicked on the shift log. Empty. Not a single clock in. Not one recorded entry in the time attendance system. Not one punch. He went to the payment records, 41 weeks of payroll disbursements. $1,100 each. Processed every Friday without exception. $45,100. Paid to an account attached to an employee who had never worked a shift, never clocked in, never existed anywhere in this building except as a line in a spreadsheet that funneled money to somewhere other than where it was supposed to go. James photographed every screen. 3 photos, steady hands, no flash. He stood, walked out of the office, pulled the door back to exactly the gap he'd found it in. Kept moving. Because here was what $45,100 looked like from the other direction. It looked like Dora Haynes working 9 hours out a week on paper and 30 in reality. It looked like health insurance she'd earned 3 times over that kept getting technically reset before it could activate. It looked like 32 complaints that someone had quietly buried because the people filing them had no leverage and nowhere else to go. It looked like a daughter named Becca drawing a hospital in bright colors because no one had told her yet that she should be worried. James moved 3 more pallets. He breathed through it. At 3:15, his phone buzzed. He stepped into the far end of the garden center. Close to this hour, dark, the seasonal display still up from winter, and read the message. It was from the contact he'd texted 2 days ago. The one who ran background verifications quietly, without paperwork trails, for people who needed the truth before they could decide what to do with it. Devon Price, Pryor Group LLC, a consulting subsidiary, left 2019. Current hire, date Caldwell's branch, 7 years, 3 months ago. Vouched for at time of hire by F. Tellis, CFO, Caldwell's Corporate. James read it twice, put the phone away. Stood among the dormed garden display in the dark for a moment. So Devon Price had been placed here by Frank Tellis. Not 3 weeks ago, 2 years ago, before the cost optimization plan. before the complaint suppression campaign had hit full stride. Devon had been here from near the beginning of whatever this was, which meant one of two things. Either Devon had been watching for 2 years and reporting back, in which case Frank had known everything happening at this store for 2 years. Or Devon had been placed here and then largely left alone, a sleeper resource Frank could activate if things became complicated, which they apparently had, given that Devon had immediately found James on his first break and asked careful questions wrapped in casual conversation. James thought about Devon's manner, the ease of it, the way he offered information, real information, accurate information about Boyd and the scheduling system, while simultaneously positioning himself in James's field of trust. That wasn't the behavior of someone who knew they were working for the wrong side. That was someone who had been told one version of the story and was working from it sincerely. James didn't know that for certain, but he held the possibility. He went back to the pallets. At 4 in the morning, Devon found him near the last staging zone. "Done?" Devon asked. "Last 3, James said. Devon looked at the arrangement. "Boyd'll find something wrong with it. I know. He always does. That's the mechanism." Devon set down the clipboard he was carrying. A rare thing. Devon was almost never without the clipboard. He assigns impossible work so that the incompleteness of it becomes the reason for the next punishment. It's self-sustaining. James stacked the last box. "How long have you known that?" he said. Devon was quiet for a moment. "About a year," he said. "Maybe more. And you stayed." "I needed the job," Devon said, simply, without self-pity. James straightened, looked at him directly. "Is that the only reason?" Devon met the look. Something passed across his face. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated. The expression of a person who has been carrying a question for long enough that the carrying has become habitual, and the question underneath it has gotten hard to find. "No," Devon said finally. "Not the only reason." He picked up his clipboard, walked back towards the stockroom. James watched him go. He filed it, did not close it. At 4:50, the store had reached its quietest hour. The particular stillness of a large commercial space between shifts. The heating system sighed steadily. The refrigerated cases in the grocery entrance maintaining their low, continuous hum. The distant sound source of a single forklift somewhere in the back warehouse that had been running all night. James found Dora in the break room. She was sitting at the table with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she'd brought from home, a plain blue mug, her own, because the break room machine had been broken for 3 weeks, and Boyd had not submitted a repair request. James knew that because he'd checked the maintenance log that morning. He'd also noted that Dora had been bringing her own coffee grounds in a small jar she kept in her locker, because the alternative was 8 hours without caffeine, and that wasn't something her body had in reserve right now. She looked up when he came in, didn't startle, just surfaced slowly, the way someone does when they've been somewhere else in their head and are finding their way back. He sat across from her. She didn't fill the silence immediately, which he appreciated. "Becca called me on break," she said eventually. "Midnight. She's not supposed to be awake at midnight. Did you tell her that?" "I told her the next time she called after 10, I was going to make her do extra math homework." James almost smiled. Did she believe slightly? Dora looked at the mug. "She told me she'd been practicing being brave. She said she holds her breath until she can't anymore, and then breathes. She says that's what brave feels like. Breathing when you're sure you can't." James sat with that. He didn't say anything for a moment. Because what do you say to that? What is there to say? "She sounds like someone I'd like to meet," he said. "She'd like you," Dora said. "She likes people who fix things." A pause. "Small things included," she added, and glanced toward the break room coffee machine, which James had spent 15 minutes on during a quiet period earlier in the night attempting to diagnose. He hadn't fixed it, but he'd tried, with a methodical patience that Dora had apparently noticed without commenting on at the time. "I'll look at it again tomorrow," he said. "The repair request is right there." She nodded toward the maintenance board. "Week 3. I see it. Boyd's aware. I know." She looked at him. "You know a lot of things," she said. "For someone who just started." James held her gaze. "I've worked in a lot of places," he said. "You learn to read them fast." She considered that, did not push further. They sat in the quiet for another few minutes. The heating system clicked. Outside, a truck passed on the street. headlights briefly visible through the high windows and then gone. "The surgery's in 3 weeks," Dora said. "Becca's?" James looked at her. They moved it up again. "Which is good, which is what I wanted." She turned the mug in her hands. "But the insurance situation hasn't changed. My hours are still classified as inconsistent. I'm still technically ineligible." She said it without drama. Just the flat recitation of a fact she had been living with, long enough that drama had stopped being available. "If I can't get coverage confirmed before the pre-authorization deadline, the surgery gets postponed again." And the cardiologist said. She stopped. "What did he say?" James asked. "That postponing again isn't a neutral option." She said it carefully, as if she'd rehearsed saying it calmly so many times. The calm was now the only register it came out in. "That Becca's condition isn't stable in the way we've been treating it as stable." James looked at the table between them. He thought about page 11 of the cost optimization plan, the subclause in the variable workforce management section. 6 lines. His signature at the bottom of the document. He thought about Frank Tellis presenting that document in a blue folder with a cover sheet about operational efficiency, and James skimming it because he had 4 other meetings that afternoon, and he trusted Frank, and the quarterly numbers looked good. He said, "I'm going to need you to trust me for a few more days." Dora looked at him. "I've been trusting you since the hallway," she said. "I'm not sure why, but I have." "A few more days," he said again. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, tight. The nod of someone who has already extended more faith than circumstances strictly supported and has decided to extend a little more. At 4:45, Boyd's office light came on. James was in the plumb with an empty cart headed back to the supply station. He saw the light under the door, heard the creak of Boyd's chair, heard the sound of a desk phone being lifted from its cradle. He slowed the cart. His phone was already in his hand. He pressed a record. Then he moved the cart to the wall beside the supply closet, which sat adjacent to Boyd's office with only a shared wall between them. He did not stop moving entirely. He kept a hand on the cart handle. To anyone who might come around the corner, he was simply a custodial worker pauses near the supply room door. Boyd's voice came through the wall, not all of it, but enough. Numbers looked on paper. A pause listening. "Yeah," she filed again. "Paper submission this time, hand-delivered to the district HR address." "Linda's on it." Another pause. "The board meeting's March 20th. Frank presents the restructuring proposal." After that, a longer pause, then a low sound that was almost a laugh. "Relax. He doesn't know anything." Frank said the old man trusts him completely. Has for 15 years. James stood at the wall. Completely still. Timeline solid. 8 points down from the pre-planned baseline, which is exactly where we need to be for the trigger. Listening again. Once he signs the transition documents in April, the structure changes. We don't need to be careful after that. He has for 15 years. Present tense spoken as if it were already past. James pressed stop on the recording. Put the phone into his pocket, stood in the corridor with one hand on the cart handle and breathed. He had known this was coming. He had known since the IP address, since Linda Marsh's name on 30 closed complaints, since Frank's office light burning at 11:40 on a Tuesday night. He had known there was something larger underneath this, something that used Boyd Garrett the way a machine uses a part, as a mechanism, not a mind. But knowing something and hearing it spoken aloud, in the flat, comfortable voice of someone who has been doing it for 14 months and expects to keep doing it through April, were 2 different things. The acquisition trigger, March 20th board meeting, April transition. The retirement form in the desk drawer of a motel room 3 miles from here. James thought about what Frank had built. 14 months. Systematic enough to move evaluation by 8 points without triggering regulatory review. Careful enough to use a policy that bore James's own signature as the legal architecture. Patient enough to wait through quarterly reviews and board meetings and dinners and handshakes and conversations about integrity, all while running the long calculations in a separate part of his mind. He thought about Dora filing her complaint 9 months ago. One person with no institutional leverage, no legal resources, no allies above her in the structure, doing the right thing through the system she'd been given, and Frank Tellis catching it before it could move. He thought about 32 people. 32. He pushed the cart back toward the supply station. At 5 in the morning, he went to the loading dock. The February cold was worse here than anywhere else in the building. The dock doors bled air from outside, and nothing insulated the space adequately. His breath came out in short, white clouds. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the parking lot. He pulled out his phone, called a number he had memorized and never saved under its actual name. Shirley answered on the first ring. She had not been sleeping. He had not expected her to be. "I need two things," he said. First, pull Dora Haynes' complete employment record from the backup server. Original classification, actual hours versus recorded hours, every change to her status, time-stamped. Cross-reference that against every other employee at this location who filed a complaint in the last 14 months. "Understood," Shirley said. "And second, I need to arrange a conference call with Frank Tellis," James said. "But I need it to look like it's coming from you. Routine financial review. Nothing that would put him on alert. A pause when. Day after tomorrow," James said. "Morning. I'll tell you the rest when I see you." James. She only used his first name when she meant for him to pay full attention to the next sentence. "How far does this go?" He looked at the parking lot, at the employee cars lined up under the dock lights. Dora's car was there, 14 years old, a side mirror held on with electrical tape, the kind of car that belongs to someone who has been making choices about money for a long time. "Far enough that I need legal on standby," he said. "Criminal division." A long pause. "I'll have everything ready," Shirley said. He hung up, stood on the loading dock a moment longer. He thought about Devin Price. 2 years at this store, placed by Frank, asking precise questions on James' first break, and yet feeding James accurate information about Boyd, about the scheduling system, about the way power worked in this building. Either Devin was running a sophisticated double, maintaining trust while reporting back, or Devin had been given one version of the story Frank and was operating inside it sincerely. James needed to know which. Not because it changed what came next, but because Devin was 30 years old and had his own accounting to salt it with whatever this turned out to be, and James was not interested in collateral damage if it could be avoided. He went back inside, found Devin in the stockroom, finishing up the last of the night's inventory entries. He stood nearby for a moment without speaking. Let Devin finish the entry he was on. Devin looked up. "Long night," Devin said. "Yeah," James said. He paused. Made the call he'd been making internally for 3 days. "Devin," he said. "The person who got you this job." Devin went still. "Frank Tellis." No inflection. Just the name. Devin looked at him for a full 4 seconds. Not the casual look. The real one. "Who are you?" Devin said. "Someone who needs to know if you understood what you were placed here to do," James said. Devin set the clipboard down. "I was told to flag any signs of labor organizing," Devin said carefully. "That's all I was told. That it was a protective measure, that the store had some prior issues with outside agitators and corporate wanted early warning." He paused. "I was told it was standard. Did it seem standard?" James said. Devin said nothing for a moment. "After the first few months, no," he said. "It didn't. What did you report?" "Nothing that hurt anyone," Devin said. He said it with the precision of someone who has been measuring that line carefully for a long time. "I reported that employee morale appeared generally low. That management style was strict. Nothing specific, nothing with names." James studied him. "Frank is your connection to this job," James said. "Not your family." "My mother's sister married him 15 years ago," Devin said. "I've known him since I was 18. I thought." He stopped. "I thought he was a good man. I thought this was a favor." James held that. He thought about the word favor. The things that get built inside that word. The obligations, the assumptions. The way you stop asking questions about something when you believe it was done for you out of generosity. "Devin," James said. "In 2 days, some things are going to happen in this store. I need you to not report anything between now and then." Devin stared at him. "Not because I'm asking you to cover something up," James said. "Because I'm asking you to stop covering something else up." A long silence. Devin looked at the clipboard, then at James. "I stopped reporting 3 days ago," Devin said quietly. "After the first week you were here." James looked at him. "I figured it out," Devin said. "Not who you are, but what you were doing." He paused. "I decided I'd rather be on the right side of whatever came next." The stockroom was quiet around them. The last forklift had shut down. Dawn was maybe 40 minutes away. Okay, James said. He turned to go. Mr. started. James stopped. Whatever his reasons were, Devon said, for placing me here. It wasn't a favor. No, James said. It wasn't. He walked back to the floor. The shift had 40 minutes left. He worked them. Because James Caldwell did not leave a shift unfinished. It was the first week of March. James knew that the board meeting was scheduled for the 20th, which meant he had less than 2 weeks before, Frank Tellis walked into a room full of people James had known for years and presented a restructuring proposal designed to make Caldwell's look like a company in managed decline. A company whose founder had, with good timing and good fortune, decided to step away just before the numbers got difficult. He was not going to let that happen, but he was also not going to move before he was ready. Because ready meant something specific. It meant having everything documented, everything verified, everything in the hands of people who could do something lasting with it. A CEO firing a regional manager in a dramatic confrontation was one afternoon's news. A federal wage theft investigation with recorded evidence, documented financial fraud, and a paper trail reaching from the stockroom floor to the CFO's office was something that could not be walked back. He spent the early morning of March 7th at the desk in the motel room. He laid everything out in the order it would need to be presented. The analyst's report on the altered data, time-stamped, sourced, specific, the payroll records for Beget Jr., 41 weeks, $1,100 each. 0 corresponding shifts. The photographs of the scheduling system taken from Boyd's office at 3 in the morning. The recording from the corridor. Boyd's voice. Frank's name.
March to April.
Acquisition trigger. The employment records Shirley had pulled from the backups server. Dora's actual hours versus her recorded hours, who is laid side by side across 34 months, showing a pattern so consistent it could only have been deliberate. The 32 closed complaints, each one time-stamped, each one closed by L. Marsh within 24 hours of submission before any stores-level supervisor had been notified. And one more thing, he called Shirley at 7:15. She answered immediately. The conference call, he said. Is it set? 10 a.m., she said. Frank thinks it's a quarterly liquidity review. Standard format. Won't be suspicious. We've run these before. Who else will be on the call? Patricia Dean from Corporate Legal and Robert Voss. A pause. He asked to be included when I told him it involved the CFO. Robert Voss had been on Caldwell's board for 11 years. He was 71 years old, had made his first money in manufacturing, and had a finely calibrated instinct for when something in a company was being managed rather than disclosed. James had disagreed with him in boardrooms more times than he could count. He trusted him completely. Good, James said. One more thing, Shirley. Yes, when this is over today, and it will be over today, I need you at the store by 2 o'clock with your audit team. Full personnel review. Every file Boyd has touched in the last 14 months. I'll be there at 1:30, she said. He thanked her, hung up, sat for a moment. He thought about what today was going to cost, not strategically. Just honestly, Frank Tellis had been his CFO for 15 years, had been in the room for every major decision James had made in that time, had sat across from him at dinners and talked about what it meant to build something that outlasted you, something that kept taking care of people after you were no longer the one doing the taking care. James had believed every word. He didn't know yet whether Frank had believed any of them. That question would have to live unanswered. There were things you didn't get closure on, and the interior life of a person who had spent out 15 years deceiving you was one of them. He put on the work jacket, checked the badge one last time. Jimmy Cole took Sos to Teal's staff. He drove to Branch 7. Not for a shift, but because there was one conversation he needed to have before 10 o'clock, and it needed to happen here, in this building, between the two people who had been in this from the start. Dora was in the break room when he arrived at 8:15. The renovated break room, which did not exist yet, was still the same room with the same chair with the zip-Z repair and the same broken coffee machine and the same wall-mounted maintenance request board going unanswered. He would remember that later. The contrast. What this room was now versus what it would become. But for now it was still the room where they had sat across from each other with cold coffee and talked about a daughter practicing brave. She was eating breakfast. An actual breakfast, not something grabbed from a vending machine. A container from home. She had started bringing more things from home. He'd noticed the coffee, the food. Small acts of self-preservation in a place that had been quietly eroding her for 3 years. She looked up when he came in. Read his face immediately. Set down her fork. Today, she said, not a question. Today, he said. He sat across from her. She was quiet for a moment, processing something then. Tell me what you need from me. The notebook, he said. I need you to give it to someone I trust when she arrives this afternoon. Her name is Shirley Owens. She's my HR director. You don't to you directly. Dora nodded. And I need you to be here at 2 o'clock, he said. Not for a shift, for a meeting, all staff. What kind of meeting? James looked at her steadily. The kind that ends things, he said. She held his gaze. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and put the notebook on the table between them. He didn't touch it. It was hers. It would stay hers until Shirley could take it into evidence. Becca's surgery, she said. 3 weeks. I know the date, he said. By end of business today, the pre-authorization will be filed. Shirley will have it confirmed before she leaves this building. Dora looked at the notebook on the table. She did not cry. She pressed her lips together and looked at the notebook for a long moment and breathed. The way her daughter had described being brave, breathing when you're sure you can't. 3 years, she said. I know. 9 months since the complaint. I know, Dora. He sat across from me and told me to my face that the system showed nothing. I know. He paused. And I'm sorry it took this long for someone with the ability to act to actually show up. She looked at him then. Not with anger, with the particular exhausted grace of a person who has been waiting to be seen for so long that the seasick self is almost more than they can hold. You showed up, she said. Later than I should have, he said. She shook her head slowly. You're here now, she said. That's the part that matters. She picked up her fork, went back to her breakfast. James stood. He had a phone call to make. He sat in his rental car in the employee lot at 9:55. Laptop open, phone connected. The encrypted line Shirley had set up running through a corporate server that logged everything automatically. Rachel Dean from corporate legal was already on. Robert Avos joined at 9:58, 2 minutes early the way he always was. At 10 o'clock exactly, Frank Tellis joined the call. Morning, everyone. His voice came through the speaker with its familiar ease. The voice of a man with no particular concerns about a Tuesday morning. Shirley said this was the quarterly liquidity review. I have the Q1 projections ready if you need them. We'll get to those, Shirley said. James is also on the call. A pause, 2 seconds, the specific silence of a person whose body has received information it needs a moment to process. James, careful, professionally casual. I didn't realize you'd be joining. Good to have you. Frank, James said. He kept his voice even. Not cold, not warm, just present. I've been doing some reading this week, James said. Catching up on some things I should have caught up on sooner. I wanted to talk through a few of them with you. Of course, Frank said, still smooth. Still the voice of a man who had been in difficult conversations before and knew how to manage their temperature. Branch 7, James said. A fractional pause. What about it? The quarterly satisfaction report we received in February, James said. 0 complaints, 0 turnover. Labor cost down 27%, strong numbers, Frank said. Boyd Garrett runs a tight operation. He does, James said. I've been watching him run it. Silence. Real silence this time. I've been at Branch 7 for 2 weeks, Frank, James said. Working the floor. Day shift and night shift both. Nothing from the other end of the line. As I've seen Boyd time from employees for restroom tile he didn't like. I've watched him assign a pregnant cashier to overnight inventory work in February because her doctor's appointments were affecting her availability. I've watched him systematically adjust Dora Haynes' scheduled hours every week, without exception, to keep her just below the threshold for health insurance eligibility. For 34 months. He paused. Her daughter has a heart condition. The surgery is in 3 weeks. Dora has been working full-time hours for 34 months and has once technically qualified for coverage because her hours move the week before the eligibility clock resets. He heard Frank breathe. James, if there are operational concerns at the store level, the appropriate process would be B. Garrett Jr., James said. Silence. Employee ID 4481, James said. 41 weeks of payroll disbursements, $1,100 per week. No recorded shifts, no clock-ins, no physical presence in that building at any point in the last 10 months. He paused. $45,100 paid to an account that exists to move money out of the labor budget, without reducing the headcount numbers that get reported upward. Frank did not speak. I have the screen captures, James said, time-smainted, from the scheduling system itself. Robert Voss, who had not spoken since the call began, said, Frank, I'd recommend you stop talking. I'm not finished, James said. Not harshly, just factually. 32 complaints submitted through the internal HR portal in the last 14 months. All 32 routed to Linda Marsh's account and closed within 24 hours of submission, before any store-level supervisor was notified, before any review was conducted. He let that sit for a moment. Linda Marsh reports directly to you, Frank. Has for 6 years. A sound from Frank's end of the line, something that wasn't words yet, and last Tuesday morning at approximately 4:47 a.m. James said Boyd Garrett received a phone call in his office. He discussed the acquisition trigger, the March 20th board meeting, the April transition documents. James paused here because this was the sentence that cost him something, and he was going to say it exactly right. And the fact that, and I'm quoting now, the old man trusts him completely, has for 15 years. He reached over and played 12 seconds of the recording. Boyd's voice, clear and flat and comfortable, coming through the laptop speaker into a rental car in a parking lot in February. Then silence. Frank said, James, I need you to understand that the board structure at this point in the transition. Frank. James spoke over him, not loudly, quietly enough that it was unmistakably deliberate. I'm going to ask you one thing. Not for an explanation, I have those. One question. Frank did not speak. Was there a moment, James said, in 14 months, any moment, where you thought about the people, not the numbers, not the valuation points, not the acquisition timeline, the people? Dora Haynes, standing in Boyd's office while he crosses out her hours in red pen. The 32 people who filed complaints because they trusted the system. Was there one moment where any of that registered as something other than a variable? The line was completely silent. Then Frank said, very quietly, James, that's all I needed to know, James said. He ended the call. Robert Voss called back within 40 seconds. I've already called Rachel, Robert said. We're pulling the full financial audit. Every transaction Frank has touched in the last 18 months. A pause. Frank tendered his resignation 11 minutes after you ended the call. His assistant forwarded it to the board. Another pause. James, this is going to be public. I know, James said. The press will. I know, Robert. A pause. You did the right thing, Robert said. James looked at the store through the windshield. I did the necessary thing, he said. Those aren't always the same. He got off the phone, sat for exactly 3 more minutes. Then he got out of the car and went inside. Shirley arrived at 1:30 with 2 members of her audit team and a woman James had not met in person until that morning. Grace Okafor, a federal labor attorney referred by the contact James had called from the loading dock 4 nights ago. They had spoken by phone twice. She came in through the employee entrance, now with a leather portfolio, and the focused stillness of someone who arrived at difficult situations as a matter of profession and had learned to keep her own reactions elsewhere. Dora met Shirley near the groom. She handed over the notebook without ceremony. Shirley took it with both hands, opened it, read 1 page, closed it. She looked at James, he looked back. They had worked together for 20 years. They had navigated labor disputes and regulatory reviews, and one extremely difficult wrongful termination suit in 2018 that had kept them both up for 3 months. In all of that, Shirley had never looked at him the way she looked at him right now. Not with admiration exactly, but with the recognition of someone who has watched a person do something that cost them something real. She put the notebook carefully in her portfolio. Grace Okafor positioned herself near the customer service desk. She set her portfolio on the counter and opened it without fuss. She was here to observe, to document, and to ensure that what happened in the next 2 hours was conducted in a manner that would hold up to whatever came after. She had reviewed the recordings and the financial records that morning. She had said simply and without drama, "This is sufficient for federal referral. Proceed when you're ready." At 2 o'clock, Boyd called the mandatory all-staff meeting. He'd received word through the district coordinator that corporate was sending an efficiency review team for a surprise walk. Boyd had called everyone in to make sure the location looked managed. He was in the kind of mood he got into when he was trying to project confidence over anxiety. Slightly over crisp, slightly too deliberate. The swagger dialed up to a frequency that broadcast effort rather than ease. 15 employees gathered near the customer service desk. James stood at the back of the group, still in the work jacket, still wearing the badge. One last time, he looked at the people in the room. Terry from the front registers, who had been reclassified as part-time on paper 6 months ago, while continuing to work full-time hours. Arthur, who had been passed over for a raise review twice on the basis of manufactured performance concerns. 2 women from the cosmetics section, who stood close together with the posture of people bracing for something they couldn't predict. The overnight crew who had worked through till 6 and come back in for this, because missing a mandatory meeting under Boyd's management carried its own invisible costs. Dora, standing near the middle of the group, hands at her sides, notebook on, safe with Shirley now, waiting. Boyd walked in at 2:04, clipboard, pressed shirt, the walk. He scanned the room, settled into his position at the front with the ease of who had stood in exactly this configuration many times and found it comfortable. "Thanks for being here," he said. "Quick overview of the efficiency review process and what corporate is looking for in terms of..." Boyd. James stepped forward from the back of the group. One step, unhurried. The way you move when you've arrived at something rather than rushing toward it. Boyd looked up. His eyes found James. Found the work jacket, the badge, moved to the face above it, and James watched the recognition happen. Not all at once, in stages, the confusion first. This face in this context doesn't make sense. Then the uncertainty that follows confusion. Then the specific moment when the brain stops arguing with the information the eyes are delivering. Boyd's clipboard dropped 6 inches in his grip. He stopped. "James Caldwell," James said. The room changed, not dramatically, quietly. The way a room changes when the thing everyone has been sensing but couldn't name suddenly has his name. 15 people went completely still. Boyd recovered faster than James had expected, which said something about Boyd that wasn't admirable but was, at least, consistent with everything else James had observed about him. He straightened. "This is a personnel matter that should be handled through proper. I've been here for 2 weeks, Boyd," James said. "Day shift and night shift. I've watched you dock 15 minutes from Dora Haynes for grout in a restroom she'd been on for 40 minutes, using cleaning solution that was already 3 weeks past its replacement date because you blocked the supply order." He kept his voice level, precise, every word doing specific work. "I've watched you assign custodial worker the full store night shift load that previously required 2 people at the same pay with no adjustment to hours or classification. I've watched you add a night rotation to her schedule on top of a full day shift with 3 hours between because she has a daughter with a heart condition and you knew she couldn't say no." He paused. "And I've watched you move her scheduled hours every week for 34 months. Never enough to trigger a formal review, always enough to reset her eligibility clock before it reached the threshold." Boyd said nothing. "I have the payroll records for B. Garrett Jr., James said. 41 weeks, $1,100 each week. 0 shifts worked. $45,100. He reached into his jacket and placed his phone on the nearest shelf, screen up. "I have the recording from Tuesday morning, and I have 9 months of daily handwritten documentation from an employee who's trusted that if she recorded the truth carefully enough, someone would eventually come and read it." He looked at Dora. She looked back. She did not look away. Boyd's face had cycled through several things and arrived at something that was trying very hard to look like indignation. "You recorded me without." "Mrs. Okafor," James said. Grace stepped forward from her position near the services desk. "Mrs. Okafor is a federal labor attorney," James said. "She has reviewed the recordings, the financial records, and the complaint documentation. She can speak to the recording statute question. She can also speak to the wage theft provisions, the benefit fraud elements, and what the next steps look like from a federal referral standpoint." He held Boyd's gaze. "She's been here since 1:30. Boyd looked at Grace, looked at Shirley, looked at James. and the rest of Boyd's composure left him, not with a crash, more like a pressure loss, the kind that leaves a structure standing but empty. "I want to call." "You can call whoever you need to call," James said. "But two things are going to happen first." He nodded to Shirley. Shirley opened her laptop, and two members of the building security team, who had been positioned near the loading docks since 1 o'clock, came through the stockroom door and walked to where Boyd was standing. "Boyd Garrett," James said. "You're terminated, effective immediately, pending a federal investigation into wage theft, benefit fraud, and conspiracy to defraud. These officers will escort you from the premises. Your personal belongings will be collected and returned to you." Boyd looked at the security officers, opened his mouth. "Don't," James said, one word, quiet enough that it didn't fill the room. But it landed with the full weight of everything James Caldwell had been for 52 years and everything Boyd Garrett was not. Boyd closed his mouth. He was escorted out through the main entrance, past the checkout lanes, past the customer service desks, past the schedule board on the wall with its history of crossed-out names and penciled revisions, past the restroom corridor where Dora had been crying 14 days ago. The door closed behind him. The room exhaled. James turned to face the 15 people standing in the room. He had prepared several versions of what to say in this moment. The formal one, the corporate one, the measured, leadership-appropriate one about going forward accountability and systemic reform. He said none of them. "I owe you an apology," he said. The room stayed quiet. But the quality of the quiet shifted. "In 2022, I signed a policy that gave regional managers a tool they should never have had. I signed it because I trusted someone I had trusted for 15 years, and because I did not read it carefully enough." He stopped. "Let that sit where it needed to sit. That is not an excuse. There is no version of that where it becomes acceptable. I'm telling you because you deserve to understand how it happened." He looked at the room, not at the group, at the people, face by face. "This company exists because of what you do," he said, "not because of what happens on the 18th floor. Not because of quarterly reports, or board meetings, or anything that takes place in a room I've spent the last 20 years spending too much time in. It exists because of what you do on this floor, every shift, every task that no one notices until it isn't done." He paused. "I lost sight of that. I let the distance between me and this floor grow large enough that things like this could happen in my company's name and not reach me. That distance is going to close. Permanently." He looked at Shirley. She was already at the table she'd set up near the customer service desk, laptop open, audit team arranged beside her. "Let's start," he said. What followed was 90 minutes of the most precise, unhurried work James had watched Shirley Owens do in 20 years. Every file, pulled, reviewed, cross-referenced against the actual hours in the backup system, the mirror server that Boyd hadn't known existed, that Shirley had been running quietly for 6 months on her own authority, because she had noticed things she couldn't prove and had made the decision to be ready when proof arrived. "Dora Haynes," Shirley said. Dora stepped forward. Shirley's eyes moved across the screen. "Full-time continuous employment, 34 months. Classification on record, part-time temporary. Classification in reality, confirmed by backup timekeeping, full-time for the entirety of your employment." She typed. "Benefits eligibility is immediate. I'm filing the insurance pre-authorization for Becca Haynes's cardiac procedure right now. You'll have the confirmation number within the hour." Dora stood at the table. She was not crying. She was doing something harder than crying. She was holding completely still while something enormous moved through her. The specific stillness of a person in the middle of a feeling too large to move around in. "Back pay calculation," Shirley continued. "Hours worked versus hours recorded over 34 months at your contractual rate." She looked at the number on the screen. "Dora, the company owes you $14,320. A long science check will be issued within 48 hours, Shirley said. Dora nodded. Once. She pressed one hand briefly against her mouth, then she stepped back. James looked at the schedule board across the room. He looked at it for a long time, at the crossed-out names and the pencil arrows and the handwritten revisions. At 34 months of deliberate chaos made visible in 2 colors of marker. He looked until he could look at it steadily. Then he turned back to the table. They went through every file. Terry, reclassified to full-time, 6 months back pay calculated and confirmed. Arthur, 2 suppressed raise reviews reversed, difference paid. Performance record corrected with a note in the file explaining the source of the original negative assessments. The 2 women from cosmetics, both of whom had had hours cut in the same 2-week period after one of them had asked about the maternity leave policy. Reclassified, back pay issued, maternity leave options formally explained. Each one different, each one the same kind of different. The shape that appeared when someone with small power and no conscience was given the tools to grind people down incrementally, carefully enough that each individual act could be defended and the aggregate was invisible to anyone not looking directly at it. James stayed at the back of the room for all of it. This was Shirley's work. His role here was to have made it possible and then to get out of the way. At 3:45, Devin Price came in. He shouldn't have been on shift until 10. He was in his regular clothes. He stood near the entrance for a moment, then crossed the room and stopped in front of James. "As I'm resigning," Devin said. James looked at him. "You don't have to." "I was placed here under circumstances I didn't fully understand," Devin said. "When I figured out what those circumstances were," he stopped. "I didn't do enough fast enough." "You stopped reporting," James said. "Not soon enough." "Were you aware of the wage theft?" "No." "The benefit fraud?" "No." "The acquisition plan?" Devin held his gaze. "Not the details. I knew Frank was running some kind of positioning strategy. I didn't know what it was built on." James looked at him. A 30-year-old man who had been handed a story by someone he trusted and had operated inside it in good faith for longer than was comfortable to admit. Who had made a course correction when the story stopped holding together. Who was now standing here, in his own clothes, on his own time, asking to be accountable for the part he'd played. "Run the review with Shirley's team," James said. "Full disclosure. Everything you reported, to whom, on what dates, in what form. If it comes back clean, your position is here if you want it." He paused. "That's your call, not mine." Devin stood there for a moment. Then he walked to Sheshable and sat down. At 5 o'clock, James asked Shirley for 20 minutes. She handed the audit table to her team without breaking stride. He walked to the back of the store, past the stockroom, past the corridor where he'd stood outside Boyd's office with a phone pressed to the wall, past the supply room with its empty shelving that would be restocked by end of week. He went to the break room, sat at the same table, the same chair, the same lamp overhead, the same coffee machine that still didn't work, though he'd made 2 serious attempts at it during the night shift and intended to make a third before he left the building tonight. Some things you fixed because they were symbolic. Some things you fixed because they were broken and someone had them to. He sat there for a while. He thought about Frank Tellis, not with rage. The rage had completed its work and left behind something quieter and more settled. The particular grief of discovering that a person you had spent 15 years building mutual understanding with was, at some fundamental level, running a parallel calculation the entire time. That the Frank who talked about integrity at dinners and the Frank who was managing an acquisition scheme through the careful destruction of 11,000 people's sense of security were the same Frank. Not 2 different people. One person who had learned to occupy both registers simultaneously and had never once let the dissonance show. Robert Voss had texted him at 2:15, while the audit was still running. Frank resigned before his assistant could forward the board notification. Effective immediately. Rachel has the financial records. Federal referral goes in tomorrow morning. James had read it, put the phone in his pocket. Gone back to watching Shirley work. Frank Tellis had spent 14 months building a mechanisms designed to outlast James's involvement in his own company. It had taken James 14 days to dismantle it. He did not feel triumphant about that. He felt the weight of the 14 months and what they had cost the people in this building, and he understood that Frank's resignation and the federal referral and whatever came after were not the end of something. They were the accounting. The damage had already been done. What remained was the repair. You could not repair 14 months in an afternoon. But you could start. He thought about his father, Earl Caldwell, green uniform, 31 years. Dignity that didn't wait for permission from anyone. What would he say right now if he could see this room? James knew exactly what he would say. He would say, "You found out. Now fix it. Why are you still sitting there?" James smiled. For the first time in 2 weeks, he smiled without it costing him anything. He pulled out his phone and called his daughter. He insisted on the second ring. "Dad, are you?" "I'm fine," he said. "I'll explain everything Sunday." "Sunday dinner, Sunday dinner." He paused. "I'm going to tell you story. About something I should have caught sooner and didn't, about what it cost. And about some people who kept showing up anyway, in spite of that, and what they're owed because of it." A pause on her end. "Is it a good story?" she asked. He looked at the break room wall. At the maintenance request board with its unanswered entries. At the chair with the zip tie repair. At the coffee machine he was going to fix before he left this building. "It's a true one," he said. "That's better." He hung up, sat for one more minute, then went back to the floor. He found Dora near the front entrance at 6:15. She was standing in front of the space where the schedule board had been, just looking at the clean rectangle of wall, the paint slightly brighter there than the surrounding surface, protected from 2 years of indirect light and the ambient accumulation of a busy floor. Clean space. Room for something else. "We're replacing that," James said. "I know. New system. Locked against single manager modification. All schedule changes above store level require dual authorization and employee notification 48 hours in advance." She nodded. "Dora," he said. She turned. "I have a question for you, and I want you to answer it honestly, including if the honest answer is no." She waited. "I'd like you to consider taking over as store manager, interim, with a formal review at 90 days. He kept his voice steady and direct. "I'm not asking because you're the most convenient option or because I feel I owe you something, though I do. I'm asking because I watched you work for 2 weeks. I watched treat people on this floor. I watched how you carry yourself under conditions designed to make you small. And I watched you keep a 9-month record of the truth with no guarantee that anyone would ever read it." He paused. "That is the quality of person I want running this store." Dora looked at him. "I mop floors," she said. "You know every job in this building," he said. "You know what it costs to do each one. You know who is struggling and what they need and what fair treatment looks like because you've spent 34 months measuring the distance between that and what you were given." He met her eyes. "That is not nothing. That is in fact everything." She was quiet. "Interim," she said. "Yes, with training. Full management development. Whatever you need, as long as you need it. And I can step back if it's wrong for me. At any point. For any reason. With no consequence to your current position and benefits." She thought about it. She looked at the clean space on the wall. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and took out the insurance confirmation Shirley had printed for her 2 hours ago. Becca's surgical procedure, the date, the references. She held it for a moment, put it back. "Okay," she said. James looked at where the board had been. "One more thing," he said. He took a second envelope from his jacket pocket and held it out. She looked at it. "What's this?" "Your back pay commission," he said. $14,320. The check processes in 48 hours. He paused. "I wanted you to have the paper in your hand." She took the envelope. Did not open it immediately. Held it the way you hold something you've been waiting for long enough that the waiting has come more familiar than the having. "Thank you," she said. Not in the way people say thank you when they mean how kind. In the way they say it when they don't have a bigger word for what they mean. "Thank you," he said back. "For the notebook, for staying, for trusting me in that hallway when you had no reason to." She shook her head slightly. "I almost didn't. I almost kept walking," he said. "We're even." She almost smiled. He almost did too. She picked up her bag, walked to the main entrance, pushed through the door and into the March evening. James stayed in the building for another hour, helped Shirley pack up, said goodbye to each remaining employee by name. Arthur shook his hand for a long time without saying anything. Terry said he hadn't thought things like this actually happened. James said he hadn't either for a while. Devon Price found him near the exit. "The review is done," Devon said. "Shirley has everything. 6 reports over 2 years, 4 about general morale, 2 about employees who'd asked about union representation." He held James's gaze. "No names, no suspicions. I told Frank I didn't have them. Was that true?" James asked. "No," Devon said. "I had them. I chose not to give them." James looked at him. "The position is yours," he said. "Shirley will have the paperwork." Devon nodded, started to turn away. "Devon," James said. He stopped. Frank placed you here because he thought you'd be useful to him, James said. You weren't. That's the thing worth keeping. Devon stood there for a moment. Then he walked to Shirley's table. James walked out through the main entrance. The March evening had gone dark while he was inside. Not the hard dark of February, something with slightly less certainty to it, the darkness of a month that hasn't fully decided yet what it's going to become. He walked to his car, got in, reached into his jacket and took out the retirement form. He had transferred it from the motel room drawer to his jacket pocket that morning, without deciding why. Now he understood why. Some decisions need to be made in the right place, at the right time, after you know what you're actually deciding. He read it once. The line at the bottom waited, his name printed above it, the date blank. He folded it, put it back in his pocket, unsigned. He had 46 stores to visit. He had an audit to oversee and a CFO position to fill with someone he would this time read twice before, and a board meeting on the 20th that was going to look nothing like what Frank had prepared for it. He had a coffee machine in a break room that still needed fixing. He started the car. Sunday dinner. His daughter would make something that took longer than expected and turned out to be worth it, and he would sit at her table and tell her everything. About the motel room, about the hallway and the sound behind the door and the decision to knock, about the notebook, about page 11 and 6 lines and his own signature, about what it meant to build something and then stop looking at it closely enough to see what it was becoming. All of it. Because the people you love deserve the version of you that accounts for its mistakes out loud. He pulled out of the parking lot, drove through the Chicago dark. He thought about Becca, 8 years old, holding her breath until she couldn't, then breathing anyway. Not because it stopped being hard, because breathing was the thing that came after hard, and she had decided that was enough of a reason. He thought about Dora going home right now to make that call. He drove. The city moved around him, enormous, indifferent, and full of people working the hours they'd been given, or the hours they'd fought for, or hours that were all they could get, in buildings that kept the lights on long after the people inside them should have been allowed to rest. All of them deserving someone who showed up and looked. He kept driving.